good afternoon, and thank you for those brave enough to cut your lunch short and come in. My name is Martin Watson, and I'm just quickly going to go around and ask, where are you from? Vous êtes d'où, madame?
De la ville de Bruxelles.
Ville de Bruxelles. Moi aussi, j'habite à Bruxelles, et ici c'est
Liège.
Ville de Liège.
Liège.
Gdańsk.
Hop, 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 hop. Sie kommen aus
Hanover in Germany.
Hannover,
Koblenz in Germany.
Trèves. Trèves. And the most famous city in Portugal, which needs no introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon, you will be looking at this, the Manifesto of Aubervilliers et Saint-Denis. And it says on page 8 that the respect for fundamental rights is critical for security. Under the slogan, this is your slogan, a just city is a safer city. Well, I'm representing the Fundamental Rights Agency of the European Union, and we also believe in your manifesto. A just city is a safer city, and the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights can help EFUS. We've developed a toolkit. I can't show it to you, but here's a screenshot. And this really relates to what the colleague from Poland and others were saying this morning. This toolkit is written by you. We went to local authorities all across Europe and asked them, when you're doing security policy, when you're doing other things, what are the problems you face with fundamental rights? And these are the answers they gave. Now, how does this relate to your manifesto? I saw 3 areas immediately. You were talking about the necessary link between the national and the local level. The toolkit deals with that. Your president was saying in the questions, how do we get citizens to participate? This toolkit has a lot of information about how citizens can participate. And finally, you talk about the gender approach and how necessary that is. But you also talk about a whole load of other issues. These are just 3. On the first one, the interaction between local, regional, and national. This toolkit of the Fundamental Rights Agency is fundamentally about how do you link local, regional, and national policies together. It has advice on how do you set up that coordination, how do you engage political leadership, and very important, where do you get the money from? The toolkit has advice on that. Now everyone's listening. Where do you get the money from? Ha! On citizen participation in security, the toolkit has a lot of advice on how to map people. You have NGOs that you already work with, but what about all the other civil society groups? How about those migrants and those illegal migrants? How do you bring them in? This toolkit can help. How do you set up decision-making processes with civil society groups? And tips on facilitating those meetings. A very little tip, for example, is don't hold the meeting in your office. Go to where the stakeholders are, and at a time when they're available. Not when you're available, but when they're available, for example. The third area, just to point out, on gender, and it's been expressed a lot in the manifesto, we look at, in the toolkit, how to integrate gender and other fundamental rights policies into different departments. It's not just the police department or the Department of Social Affairs, but across all the different departments. How to get training and how to communicate on these issues. So finally, because I promised 5 minutes to the organizers, please, if there's nothing else you do, you put down the sandwich, you pick up a pen, Madame, dépose le sandwich, prends votre stylo et écris cette URL. Note it down and go and have a look and see how this toolkit can help. It is written by police officers, by people in local authorities, and it's not theoretical about the legal framework. It's extremely practical on how do I work with my colleagues, how do I get money, how do I communicate, and how do I get my manager and my mayor to buy in. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ja, we're there. Ja, vielen Dank. Danke auch. Und, genau. We wanted to follow up on that. The Fundamental Rights Agency, ils ont fait un toolkit. Oh, ils ont fait ça, c'est comme nous, ils ont fait un guide, ils voulaient montrer leur guide. On a invité le Fundamental Rights Agency.
On achète.
Pardon?
Et on peut l'acheter.
Non, c'est gratuit, c'est sur leur site. Ben, vous voyez.
Monsieur, c'était un plaisir.
Non, c'était un plaisir. Merci beaucoup. C'est sur le site web. C'est oui, pas de problème. Merci beaucoup.
So, Mr. Police, je vais écouter de vous quel plaisir. Quel honneur.
Bien. Quel honneur de ma part, président de séance avec vous. I tell you a little more. C'est l'agence. I can tell you more afterwards.
Voilà.
Oui, voilà, merci. Je vous invite de venir.
Ich bräuchte nochmal von den Manifestexemplaren.
Achso, der ist unterwegs. Beziehungsweise, die haben es jetzt noch gebaut, ich habe es jetzt mitgenommen, ich komme dann nachher zum Posten. Weil das war dann schneller als es zu machen, aber das wurde, ich weiß, bei Ihren Kollegen Frau Mitarbeiter nochmal nachgefragt und ich habe meine Kollegen, das waren keine Verzögerung, aber unterwegs, ich habe auch schon im Auto, wenn ich noch ein paar mehr noch am Schrank, ich habe das klingt 70. Die gehen nachher die Posten.
Gut, alles klar.
Das kommt auf jeden Fall. Und ansonsten noch Bescheid sagen.
Ich bin gebeten, dann nochmal nachzufassen.
Genau, aber es ist wirklich, ich glaube, und ansonsten schreibt ihr auch mal davon, dass es angeschaltet ist. Hat aber auch, glaube ich, Sachen unterwegs. Aber wenn Sie gebeten worden sind, nochmal zu nachzufassen, dann müssen wir das ja nicht. Aber wir finden das super, dass Sie das machen dürfen.
Ja, ich will das jetzt in den neuen Rat der Wahlen gemacht. Und das ist gut zu treffen, was zu stellen, ja.
Lieber jetzt, Herr Trainer.
Non.
Bon. Je propose qu'on s'assoit.
Merci. Tu me le donnes tout à l'heure.
Allez, go. J'ai pas de truc.
Est-ce que les interprètes sont de retour?
Il y en a une.
Ah oui, vous êtes là. Merci. C'était une pause très courte. Mais voilà, donc on commence dans un instant. Super, merci.
Je ne bois pas.
Qui automatiquement, quand on peut arrêter, il tourne. Non, mais on n'arrivait pas. On a décroché. Oui, mais je sais pas, on n'a pas réussi. On a décoché automatique. Il a quand même fait. C'est un peu curieux ce matin, mais bon. This will do. Où sont Catherine et Fonction? Oui.
C'est pas ton push communication, c'est ton push de sentiment. Quand c'est ton push sur le pas, tu vas continuer avec quelque chose. Et ça, si tu souris, ça te va bien.
Ouais, mais bon, voilà, c'est de la communication, parce qu'a priori, tu vois, moi, je ne dis pas parce que je me concentre.
C'est bien. André, estou aqui numa conferência internacional e falo com o Tiago e Marco, está bem? Está bem? Um abraço. Voilà. Pourquoi il y a toujours quelqu'un qui nous sonne
Toujours.
quand la mauvaise occasion?
Ah, il faut...
Non, mais c'est quelqu'un qui disait qu'il y avait
Il faut couper le téléphone,
un investisseur.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Toujours intéressant.
I hope you had even though short, good lunch break. And I'd very much like to welcome you to our second debate after Stockholm. What is expected
Faut parler dans le microphone.
Is it working? Better? All right. Well, welcome to our debate after Stockholm. What is expected of new EU policies and programs in the field of justice and home affairs?
Ça fera une nouvelle vie ici.
Is it still not working here? Better? Otherwise, I take it, but then I might start to sing. So, okay. So, yeah, welcome to the session. My name is Sebastian Sperber. I'm working in Elizabeth's team with EFUS, and I have the pleasure to moderate this session here. We have discussed this morning how Europe is affecting local work, what European dimensions of local work are. We've talked about transfrontier cooperation, of migration. So Europe is actually in towns and cities. And now we want to look at the other way around, and on this, these experiences we've discussed, formulate what we as towns and cities would like from Europe, what we would like from European policies, and of course what we would like from the new framework program that will follow on the Stockholm program. I would like directly to go to presenting our discussants. And it's quite easy actually to start with Mr. Guillaume Pinto, who is of course our president, all of you know, but he's also here today also in his role as the mayor of Matosinhos, and because he has been discussing these issues with other EU institutions already. He has been discussing the issues, in particular with the Committee of the Regions 4 weeks ago. So he's in the middle of talking about these issues and representing the European Forum on these issues. So he has, of course, much to say, and I'm really pleased that he has will discuss with us right now. We will then have Bernard Rivaillé, who is the mayor of Lormont in France, and who is also the acting president of the French Forum for Urban Security. Then we have two other specialists for crime prevention and the veterans of the European Forum, if I can say, that know very well politics at the local but also at the European level. We have at my far right Catherine Schlitz, who is the head of crime prevention in the city of Liège in Belgium, and directly to my right, Véronique Ketteler, who is the director for prevention and social cohesion in the city of Brussels. We also have another speaker, but who is still somewhere outside, I guess, lost here, but I've seen him, so I guess he will be back in a little while. Koen Gooi, who's representing the Confederation of European Probation. And it's another organization that works in a comparable field to what we do. And as you know, and as you have already seen this morning, we are not alone in thinking about what Europe should do. Unfortunately, the Committee of the Region has not come today and had to cancel, but we had this morning the informal network of the European Union on organized crime, and there are many initiatives. So we are also pleased to have Koen there to discuss with us what he thinks and comment a bit of what our position and what he thinks from the perspective of probation should be put forward in a context. And there we have him, so it's really the right moment. It's his big entrance for Kronhagen. Unfortunately, we don't have another external speakers that is indicated in the program, which is Professor Dean Feixens, who was representing, or is representing, the International Implementation Network. And this is a little unfortunate in the sense that it would have been interesting to have someone external give a view of what could be interesting. And he's working on implementation and the idea that it's not only the policy goals that are important, but also the way you bring it down and how you actually work with it. And this actually very well fits the communication that the European Commission itself has released in March on the future of home affairs, and that is entitled An Open and Secure Europe, Making It Happen. So perhaps there's something to the fact that perhaps we know already what we need to do, but we still need to do it. So without any further introduction note, I just wanted to say the idea is that we will have now all the panelists give a first initial statement of 5 minutes. And I'm the main moderator. I will do my little alarm clock so that everybody has the time to speak in a first tour. We will then have, as the last speaker, Koen, who accepted to comment afterwards, actually, to what he has heard. And then we'll start the discussion on the panel and then the discussion with everybody. And I'd like to ask the distinguished presidents of the European Forum and the French Forum to be gentlemen and to give Véronique Ketteler the floor first, because she also has other important commitments and has to leave really soon. So if you agree, Véronique Ketteler would start, and then we go around this way. Please, Véronique.
Merci, Sébastien. Alors, pour aller vite, en fait, moi, mon intervention, ça concerne le point de vue d'une ville comme Bruxelles.
To describe the point of view of a city like Brussels vis-à-vis the European institutions. With respect to Brussels, we have a communal agency called Bravo, which is linked with prevention, and it works, this particular department of the local authority, with 250 people working there, is responsible. Now, my department is smaller, that for prevention and participation. Now, this morning we were talking with the German cities, and transnational phenomena like internal displacement, internal migration with the Bulgarian and Romanian populations, and then the street population, which is a problem in Brussels, for example, and we have forced prostitution, and all of this is linked up with human trafficking. And sometimes women know what they're doing when they come, and they enter these networks voluntarily because they're so needy. But with a phenomenon like that, we have a lot of problems in trying to neutralize it and to find responses. So we need to work with other European cities on this and to see how we can come up with a European approach that's effective and really tackles the issues head on. And violent extremism is a new phenomenon that's been hitting the headlines a lot, and this was referred to yesterday in the forum. It's a very sensitive issue, but it's important to highlight it because it affects families, that is, different people. It's not a matter of isolated cases of such right-wing extremists. So I think we have to come up with a coherent approach amongst ourselves, and it's important to really stress the need for social prevention strategies, which are usually underdeveloped. Frequently, there's just kind of technological or situational prevention, but it seems to us that we have to work very early in the families, look at the causes for a lack of security, and try to give them a bright future in our communities. So that's why I think we really have a role to play as a city. And a third point is that regarding the rate of crime, it's been said that the crime rates are generally dropping in Europe, but the feeling of insecurity remains perturbing. And so we still have a role to play as cities and also at the European level with all the finance regarding the social development of neighborhoods. Facilities in the public domain, dialogue, intergenerational activities. These are all issues that we'd like to delve into and have more long-term finance. In terms of the demand vis-à-vis the Union, I have two types of request. One involves research, investment, financing, inquiries. We talked about that sort of thing this morning. On the one hand, to better be able to communicate on the numbers involved, statistics in prevention to show that it's worth it. Recently, a London institute produced a study on the inefficacy or the ineffectiveness of police drug tackling. And a month and a half ago, there was a fairly large-scale meeting organized by the UN with cities there, and talking particularly about Latin American cities, where they said that the policing there had been inefficient, and they were trying to think up schemes of prevention. And so we have to, everything we do in this field has to be done at the European level. And EFUS, of course, has a role to play. And the other aspect is observatories. The surveys of victimization, as has been done in Belgium with respect to security, that's a well-developed inquiry that we conduct every year. We have the same standard so that we can then control the results. We have a barometer so that we feel how the city, we can follow how the cities have been developing. But unfortunately, a couple of years ago, it was put on ice because the cities were so short of funding. It was rather a disaster, because I think the cities are good places to observe the feelings of insecurity in Europe. And we must be sure that the EU continues its funding so that these observatories can continue with their surveys. And thirdly, supporting other activities. Without the FSU, even if you're a large city like Brussels, I don't have access to all the information about the European policies, decisions taken by the Commission. It can only be done in the European Forum, the EFUS. And that's why Elizabeth is very helpful, sending out the calendars, the priorities, and it's really important to have a partner like EFUS that puts all this into practice, that can distill the information and send back information as well as a real two-way network. And in Brussels, we have quite a large staff, but we aren't able to raise issues in every sense. We have a positive atmosphere at the moment, politically speaking, but there are certain projects that's quite difficult to push through. So it's good if other people can carry them out, or other groups. And another thing, we're planning finance for the evaluation of projects, because frequently we follow an action for 3 years and we have an annual conference, but with respect to evaluation, it's often not very thorough, going right back to the beginning. And that's important, that the European Forum on Urban Security could do that as a kind of external body, because that can also nourish the communication that I'm talking about, which plays such an important role in prevention.
Those points already that you put forward based on your experience in Brussels, I would like to give the floor to Monsieur Bernard Rivaillé for the French Forum and for the city of Lorme, and I give him the microphone.
Merci, merci.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm going to be very brief, short and snappy, and I hope not too provocative. I'm going to speak at the local level because I'm a deputy mayor of a small town with 20,000 inhabitants. By comparison with everything we've heard about this morning, we are far from that dimension. It's quite different compared to a city of 500,000. But I am the president of the French Forum, and I can speak from that experience, and also on the executive committee. I think it's quite important because sometimes the practices can be the same. Whether you've got 20,000 or 300,000 in your community, the mayor is still at the heart of local policy. Perhaps I could give you a quick historical rundown. And then there are 3 wishes that we could word or articulate for the new members of the European Parliament. Regarding the history, maybe that's of some interest. In 1982, Gilbert Bonmaison produced a report called Prevention, Repression and Solidarity. And in the spirit of the person who founded the European Forum, these words were separate. But we have to see now that they are indissociable, that they belong together. With respect to prevention, and crime prevention in particular, those who strengthen the feelings of insecurity of our citizens are the criminals. So that's the thing. So we have to work and get the police, the social services, and other services to work together. The second thing, oh, this is the town hall ringing me up. That was the mayor himself. That was done specially. A witness. Well, no, maybe he was going to tell me that he'd kicked me out. I'm the deputy mayor. Never mind. Back in 1982, when we were talking about prevention, repression, and solidarity, we created an anti-crime unit. We wanted to have a coalition, starting with the mayor, who was more or less the center of this mechanism. But it was 10 years till 92 until a very strong idea came up that you have in French. It's in the little green book. Everybody has a different color. But this is the manifesto of d'Aubervilliers and Saint-Denis. Germany. In 1992, we said we should think globally to act locally. You know that that is the slogan of sustainable development. But what's important? It is to spread policy at the global level or the European level to help us to act at the local level where we live, so that there's no confusion or contradiction between these and the policies that are decided too high up, which can't be put into practice. So we set up a coalition. The first wish we have is that the EU take on board the need for local governance, that it reinforce it and empower it to help us to hone our skills. And we have EFUS to help us with that. And the second major concept, we talk a lot about social cohesion, especially at the local level. And one example that we find in the manifestos, either Barcelona, Zaragoza, or d'Aubervilliers, the question is how to get the questions of security and crime prevention more or less fed into our general policies or normal civic policy. For a long time, for example, buildings were constructed without taking account of who lived there and what the daily practices of the inhabitants were. And today, in recent laws, in our country at least, under the pressure of EFUS, we have what we call the diagnosis of preliminary security. How can we anticipate phenomena of crime in the buildings? So our second wish is that we harmonize policies. What Barcelona does, what Liège does, how can that impinge on us? How can that pop up and help us to have some influence? I think there ought to be modules that we could learn from each other. And thirdly, in March 2007, we're coming towards 2014, 7 years ago, a very strong law was passed in France that a lot of councillors were against, and that was the law on internal security. It was up to the mayor for the first time in French policy to use what we called a law to increase security and prevent crime, and it made the mayor the chief actor here. Our friend Diano said this morning, what you give to the mayor means you're going to get things back from him. Well, in France, the mayor is not responsible for the police or judicial services or for the courts. But it's clear, if you have a question in your city, you'll turn to the mayor. You'll say, why didn't you take action here? How come this criminal came out of prison too early, or what have you? And this calls for harmonization. So we have a tool that might be interesting. I know that in many cities that belong to the EFUS, there are local coalitions that put the mayor at the heart of local policy. And the third wish, then, is to strengthen the role of the European Forum as a place of spreading good practices. I think we're no longer at the stage of huge incantations, as it were, fine words. I think now we have to come down to earth and adapt policies to the local level, because I don't think that the European government of tomorrow is going to change the policies that reign or rule in our different countries. Belgium, Portugal, Spain, Italy, the Netherlands. I don't think so. So I think that any government in Europe will have to give us, the local councillors, what we need to do to increase prevention. So those are my three wishes.
Timing. I thank you very much, and also already for those 3 points. I think you all know we are going towards the open letter. That is the goal of the end of the day. And I think we're getting there with the precise proposals. And yeah, thank you very much for this. I'd like to pass the floor directly to Katrin Schlitz for her point of view, what we would like as local authorities from Europe.
Merci Sébastien.
Thank you, Sebastian. Well, I'm the prevention officer of the city of Liège, which has 200,000 inhabitants and is at the heart of an agglomeration of 500,000. And I'm responsible for the prevention plan, which brings together all the prevention measures, lack of security at the local level. In my remarks today, I am the spokesperson of people who spoke at a conference we organized on the 26th of November last. That was at the level of our province. So we have 600,000 inhabitants, so we are an agglomeration of various communities and municipalities around Liège. And so we had this big conference to talk about the EFUS manifesto. And so I'm going to tell you about what we thought we could come up with by way of an overall and integrated approach. We wanted to formulate expectations vis-à-vis the EU. That is our remit here. First of all, we have to ask for a recognition of the fact that when we engage in good prevention, this will be an act of solidarity with everybody, and it's a rational act as well. I expect of Europe that there intend to be concentrated policy against exclusion to reinforce inclusion for the marginalized population and to remain at the side of the victims. So it's not a matter of only being at the side of the victims in our society, but also the victims of violence and crime, even small urban crime. What I would also expect of Europe is that action can be taken, as has been the case for years anyway, to increase the employability of European citizens, but also so that solidarity can be reinforced for the benefit of people who, whatever we do, remain excluded from work. There are people who will never be given a job, but they have to be met as well. They have to be taken up. Something has to be done for them. And at the moment, there's nothing. It's a question we've been discussing all along. I expect that some questions are dealt with above the local level, because it's not just up to the local level. And the action taken should be taken on board by the higher level, as I've said. I mean, for example, a welcome and integration of migrants. It's not just the local level that should do that. And of traveling people, so-called gypsies. If this question isn't dealt with, this question of how these populations are welcomed and integrated, we will not achieve anything regarding certain sectors of prevention and lack of security. And no mayor in our cities wants to decide on their own. For example, to make a block of land available for the travelers, for example, to put up their tents or their caravans. So there should be some backup and strengthen the opportunities for the academic world as well, to assist the local councillors to explain the rationale for what we do to the local population. But that's a minimum demand. Prevention has been referred to at several occasions against drug trafficking, crime in general, terrorism. I expect that Europe put up a very clear roadmap and also keep professional secrets. When you're in a role like this, it's like walking on eggshell. What can I tell the police? What can I tell the courts? What can I tell a psychiatrist? What can a psychiatrist tell a policeman? We're always taking considerations of people and being very careful to work according to our codes of ethics. If that were made a bit clearer, if the rules were clearer, I think it'd be easier for the workers. And then there should be public-private partnerships. we're no longer at the stage of saying that security is exclusively a matter of the public domain. Of course, it mainly is, but we should also guarantee that things go on well in respect of rights and individual privileges. I also expect that a policy for security conducted at the European level avoid incarceration, for example, or locking up people who are mentally ill. Rather, such a policy should accompany them in the lives they lead, in their own context, not taking them away from that context. And also, we need to have a targeted policy regarding an improvement of accommodation and housing. I would also expect of the European Union that its policy regarding security favor the whole city, conviviality, living together in the neighborhoods. It's all very well to protect people from crime, but above all, people have to live well together with their neighbors, whether it's in the suburbs or downtown. There should be a maximum limitation on restrictions of citizens' rights, and rather they should be given a feeling of freedom. So I hope that the activities of the citizens be encouraged at all levels, from the neighborhood up until lobbying at the EU level, and above all finding out what goes on in the rest of the world. And different responses at the territorial level, these should be the most appropriate to the problems that are encountered, because sometimes the most specific response will be at the local or even the neighborhood level, or it might be a much higher level. It has to be appropriate. I expect there to be a policy of security that privileges the activity of the citizens, not just the most integrated ones, but those who tend to be marginalized. Often it's the same kind of citizen who participates, so we have to spread the net there a bit and get the local authorities to mount projects which can attract the least included and that can empower them to participate. As a source of inspiration for us, we know what's been done at Rotterdam with respect to participatory diagnostics, neighborhood by neighborhood, and this kind of experience could be very helpful. Having doctors on the ground and working with a representative sample of the population, and that there are exploratory markets of citizens who can be accompanied going around the neighborhood and identifying where there's a problem of public lack of information or different activities where there might be a lack of light in the physical sense there too. So going around in a way to increase the citizens' feeling of safety as they move around their own neighborhood. Let me repeat, in conclusion, what I expect of Europe is structured support of the EFUS for urban security. This forum is really a source of inspiration for us. The forum gives us a vision of what could be an excellent program for security, the work that needs to be done to guarantee the balance between these three pillars of security. But I referred to Rotterdam for diagnosis, but there's the city of La Rochelle as well regarding nightlife. We were inspired too. This idea of having a charter, if you like, of nocturnal life or nightlife activities, awareness of what goes on. I expect support for research to better aid the local authorities for their observation, diagnosis, and analysis, including participation in the surveys, which are often the only way to be able to effectively evaluate the activities we conduct. And as I've said, research, that is, academia, can assist us to explain things properly to the citizens. And I also expect there to be a crime prevention observatory the same model that's been developed for drugs. Why couldn't we have a broader remit for it, for the prevention of crime? And due to my own profession, I would say it's quite difficult when it comes to knowing the denominator for the activities of a criminal character in a village. You have to adjust it properly to the population, because otherwise you might concentrate on the center of the ville and the number of opportunities might be missed. In terms of retailing, teaching, and so on, these are all potential clients of criminals, if you like, who could be brought in, not just the citizens in general.
I really thank everybody to play this game here of having really 5 minutes and having it really short. And of course, it's important. That's why we're a network, for that we have time to exchange. Thank you very much, Katrina, also for all the input you've given. I mean, the list is quite long, and you remind us that actually there's so many aspects where Europe plays a role or could play a role, and where we could ask for support. Of course, the question perhaps for the discussion is later, where would be our priorities? Because we probably can have it all, but probably have certain things where we want to go forward first. But without further notice, I would like to give the floor now to our president, Mr. Pinto, to give his vision of what we should ask.
Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk in English only because I prepare my notes in English. There are only a few notes, but normally when I go to a fight, if you want, I prepare myself and know where I can kick the opponent. Meaning that in a, network that we defend the prevention, talking about a fight, is perhaps the best way to tell you that what I believe that we must strongly fight to have a new politic in European Union. Because as I saw, and Elizabeth showed us today in the morning, there is no place for prevention in the future of politics of Europe, because almost most part of the amount of money that we are going to receive goes to other politics than to policy. And so how can we convince and how can we intervene to obtain other results from the European Union? First, I suppose, talking about finance matters. Second, talking about a goal that's very important to Europe. This is an integration of justice, beginning to have a common language between the countries. This is the beginning of having common justice. And then talking about what you normally now says every day, that we must put citizens to participate. Well, they are not only talking about participation in the prevention policies, but they are talking about participation in general, and they apply to the participation of citizens. Well, let's tell them loudly that prevention is the only politic that can assure the participation of the public. Because we live in a paradox, if you want, meaning that nowadays we have two paradoxes that are extremely, for me, interesting. One is that criminal is decreasing. That's what we learned from the experts. I'm not an expert, although I was a lawyer, but I'm not expert in criminology. But that's what we learned in criminology. But while criminality is decreasing, the sense of insecurity is uprising. So this is a nonsense, and we should solve it. The second nonsense is this one. In Europe, we talk about shorter budgets. Everyone, everywhere, every country in Europe, and Europe itself, is talking about making its budget lowest. So we must choose very well, very carefully, which politics are we going to follow. And if we know that prevention in terms of criminality is better than repression, why taking off the money to prevention and putting all to repression? That's the two paradox we have, because what we see is that are people that are defending less social politics, meaning prevention. Instead, they are changing for more spectacular measures in terms of criminality, meaning repression. Stockholm was a point very interesting because he took to us 3 points, I suppose, that were rather new. One was border police cooperation. It was good. It's ever good that all the police can cooperate in European Union. A fight against terrorism, a unified fight against terrorism, and a common asylum regime. That's what Stockholm brings, among other things, but really new. But Stockholm, there was not there, and I suppose will be not after Stockholm, no place for the regional and municipalities. Municipalities and regional powers didn't have any competence or any role in the Stockholm insurance policy. So, what should we defend? First, I agree, and for me is the very first need we have is an observatory, a general observatory in Europe. Why? Because without this observatory, there is no data that can prove the success of our politic of prevention. That's why. There are many, how can I say, many forms of seeing what is a crime. There are many officers and there are many studies, but there is no general agenda or an organization that says we are seeing what is how the criminality is evolving and is decreasing. So we must have this. This is, for me, is the first point, is a general observatory of criminality in Europe with terms that we agree, with and facts that we could agree also, but this would be the best way, because that could give us common concepts, evolution of criminality, perception of the feeling of insecurity, and also analysis of politics. That would be the first fight. Create an observatory, if you please. The second one is to sustain the role of citizen regions with a direct dialogue with the European Commission, institutional recognition of the citizen regions in the role that they can have in security matters, and helping changing experience between the cities. Why? Well, we also say, and we also know why. Because first, but there's something that normally it isn't said, but I say it because I am a mayor. I'm proud of saying it, and I suppose what I say is provocative for other politicians and other institutions, because mayors perhaps still are the political persons with most credibility in Europe, meaning that, and I know because I feel it in my town, that when I go in the street, my credibility is untouched. Well, that's not general, because although mayors also can have problems, but if you look to the politicians, regional and municipality politicians are those to whom people trust. Second, we are more tied to the people, because for myself, if it's a little town, we cannot go out on the streets without touching the people. So we must be doing well our job, otherwise there will be a problem. And third, because we are the only who have urban competence. Sometimes making city safe, meaning changing urban things. I'm not going to talk about here sports and violence, sports, etc., 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 but there are many solutions that pass by changing the place where we live, how we design the squares, etc. Bon. This is the second one, is sustain the roles of citizen region. The third is pointing specific problems. First one, migration. Internal and external migration. And as a strategic to us all, I suppose we defend equally of gender. Why? We that believe in equal gender allow anyone to maltraiter, to mistreat, yes?
To abuse.
To abuse, okay, another person. Why do we allow us that someone entering in our country can abuse a woman or children? And that, I suppose, that is the red line we should not, nobody allowed to surpass. And I suppose the equality of gender will be the solution to many problems. Then, supporting cities with money, with material, with experience, promoting inclusion and cultural diversity. So, this is the first, migration. Then, asylum. Okay, fighting against that, but also supporting border cities. We are a network that know very well the problem of border cities, that facing people coming from other countries and they don't know what to do with them. Then making detention shorten is almost impossible to know that nowadays there are people that are in detention several weeks in month, only because they try to come into Europe to live another life. Okay, we can have many solutions, but I suppose the solution is not to put them in jail, in a building, or anywhere else. And then help the countries of origin, not the countries of origin out of Europe, like North Africa, but also the countries of origin that for Hungary and Bulgaria, because they have many problems of migrants. And mainly two things: avoid building a Europe fortress. I suppose that everybody noticed nowadays that in some countries they are already defending that we should put borders again. That will be the end of Europe as we know it. So we must co-responsibilize the European Commission. Then the Roma is the third specific, because Roma are also a big issue for several of our cities. And here, 2 points only. Equality of gender first, equality of gender first, equality of gender first, and second, allow municipalities to follow up the education of the young children. Meaning, we should defend a system where the young people, young Roma people, moving across from city to city, can have with them a paper or anything else that allow the new city to know where he is in school and where should the new city start. And I suppose that if we could promote our policies, because our policies are in the heart of the new political concerns. What we talk about nowadays in Europe, participation of citizens. What do? We stimulate the participation. What do we talk about in Europe? We talk about engagement. What do? We do engagement of the citizen. What do we talk about in Europe? Dialogue with civil society. That's what we do when we are talking about prevention. What do Europe talks about? Mediation, sustainability, meaning that policies that can be able to be there in the future and are less costly. So these new politics are old strategies for us. We have also eternal fights against social exclusion. That's one thing that Europe wants to fight. And to discrimination, that's also another thing that Europe wants to fight. And all Europe defends to have, I like to say it in French, la paix sociale, peace in between the sides. It's what Europe defends. So if we see this all the strategy of Europe, we can put prevention. So let's show them that what we do in the field is what they must put money on, because it's what is work. And I'm going to finalize saying that if we want to be successful defending our positions, money, common language, and new politics of Europe, because new politics of Europe are old politics for all of us that believe in prevention. And a last trick. that I'm going to ask Elizabeth and the experts of the forum. European Union is going to put a huge amount of money in smart and inclusive growth. I don't know, but we can think that smart and inclusive growth is a growth where prevention and support to the people that needs must be done. So I don't know if we don't find a way in that program to how can I say, to make a revolution, a financial revolution. So I suppose this is my point of view in what the strategy to post-Stockholm be, but I'll tell you, if you want to convince any government member, money, 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 and denounce, because he's going to spend more if he does only repression. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have now a little idea already what the different issues could be. I think the role that local authorities play is something crucial, and that comes everywhere. And also perhaps the theme of prevention, that prevention is the approach to take because it is more efficient, and the money talks, and of course also the victimization and the social part. And then you had this as a third point, different issues actually, where we could have help. That goes from migration to other things. But I think I already see it shaping up like this. But I would like to give the floor now to our guest, Koen Goai from the Confederation of European Probation to comment on what he just heard. Please.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Maybe I first should introduce a little bit the organization where I work for, the Confederation of European Probation. It is basically the umbrella organization for the probation sector in Europe. And we are a members organization. Most of our members are either organizations that are responsible for the legislation on probation or for the execution of probation. So you can imagine a lot of ministries of justice are member of our organization. Apart from that, we also have university members and research institutes, and then we have some interested individuals, not that many, but I think that the clout that we have in our sector is quite good. We represent 25 EU member states. We represent, if I'm not mistaken, 32 European countries. That goes as far as Armenia and Georgia. And our main points are to connect our members, so to unite our members and to bring about a professional exchange. Professionalization of the organizations also via undertaking European projects, and to do advocacy on a European level and a national level for probation. And in that regard, when the consultation round was held for the establishment of the Stockholm program, CEP held a consultation round among its members to see what they wanted to be integrated in the Stockholm program, so CEP could bring that forward. We did that, and what we wanted to bring forward was more attention for alternative sanctions in Europe. And we hoped we could bring in the word probation for that because, well, like Mr. Pinto said, Europe does not really have a common language, so probation in different countries means a different thing. So we really would like to have probation included. Probation is a word that you will not find in the Stockholm program, but alternative sanctions, you will. And we thought, well, that's quite good. So learning from this best practice, we're going to repeat it, and we're going to have another consultation round among our members. What we hope that will come out of it, and we think that it will, is that we will repeat our pledge for social inclusion as the best way to protect communities from harm and distress caused by crime. And from that it follows that prison should be seen as the last resort in a criminal justice system. Well, that is something which is not so explicitly in the Stockholm Programme. If you read it, you will find that the spirit of the Stockholm Programme is actually mentioning that. So that would be a repetition. Well, we'd like to go one step further, and we would like to bring in the multi-agency approach. And what we found out in the last couple of years is that probation in itself will not function well if prison will not function well, if restorative justice and victim support will not for prevention will work well. So we need the whole criminal justice chain being aligned. On a city level, I think you would be knowing all but too well what that means, because in your daily practice much more comes in: healthcare, like you say, urban planning, police, etc., etc. And we think that the time is ripe to bring this forward, because in Germany we see that Übergangsmanagement is hot. We see in Holland that chain management is hot. We see in the UK that MAPA, or multi-agency public protections arrangements, are hot. This is all more or less the same thing. So we think we have a fair chance of bringing that forward, and that is what we will do towards DG Justice and towards the European Parliament. Now, what struck me when I was hearing you, and I'm very fortunate that I still have not heard your telephone ringing, so that gives me an opportunity to talk for 1 minute more, is that if I would be working with the Commission, and I would hear what your demands are from the post-Stockholm programme, I think, well, with the Stockholm programme, we were not doing that bad, because I think actually a lot of what you're mentioning already is in the Stockholm programme. However, I think what you're actually targeting is the city perspective, and that is indeed something that is not mentioned. But if you're going to ask for inclusion, focus on asylum, addressing domestic violence, a need for statistics and benchmarks, a common language to be developed, then the EU would say, I think, hey, we already give you the means, you have to take the initiative, but there we are. I think what you're looking at is targeting more funding towards cities. And, well, as Elizabeth told us this morning, the multi-annual budget for 2014-2020 has been fixed. So there's little to change about that. But how do you channel money to your specific needs? And I think your specific needs are the cities. So my guess would be, wouldn't it be what you actually demand from the EU to bring in the city perspective in the Council, in the post-Stockholm programme? And I think it's all about the proposition that you have to make. When I read the execution or the implementation plan for the Stockholm programme, I read that what it aims is to make European justice more tangible for the European citizen. And I think that now that the Stockholm programme has come to an end almost, if we evaluate that, I don't think that I would be wrong in saying, well, we have to work some more on that, because it has not become that tangible. And I think that is where the cities come in. They are the closest to grassroots level public authority, so they are the best placed to bring the EU to the citizens. Don't you think that that would be the real message of EFUS? In time.
Thank you very much. I think that I think these were really valuable complementary thoughts that we had not completely included, but I think we can agree, of course, that the role of the city is something we have put, but also the multi-agency approach and also the alternative sanctions. So the mediation idea that's usually very important here has not been mentioned today. So the idea of how those policies take shape. I would like now to directly give the floor to the audience to comment of what you heard before we would then give to the clothing session where Dr. Shira and Mr. Pinto will together conclude the day and propose a letter. But now still a moment for a discussion. Oh, is that, you have one?
Eine Diskussion lebt ja auch etwas vom Widerspruch oder der Konfrontation, und ich will jetzt ein kleines bisschen Wasser in den...
And I want to do this now. Who pays has also the decisions at hand. So if we have this letter or resolution when we demand from the European Union to do more for prevention, then the European Union or the Brussels agency will also try to have more influence on the communities and the cities. And as a representative on a local level and a mayor, I just want to remind you all of the discussion to the Green Book to the environment protection from the European Union. Many of you might not know it, but the cities in Europe know this Green Book because there are many rules and regulations in this Green Book for the cities, and the cities were opposed to that Green Book, and they told again that it is about subsidiarity in Europe and in the European Union, and subsidiarity means that the national level and Europe is only responsible what cities and municipalities can't do themselves and achieve on their own. And many cities spoke up and were mad because it seemed like the European Union wanted even to tell them where to plant the trees. And just as a contradictory position, it can be also very dangerous to demand financial aid because you won't get that money without more rules and regulations for the cities. That's one of the remarks I wanted to make. There's the risk of that. The second remark I want to make, and I see a problem in this discussion, which will not be included in the letter later. We have a Europe of different paces, also in prevention and security policy. There are the countries in North Europe that have developed much quicker. We have the East Europe and the countries there, because of their young urbanized, civilized situation, that are very different from the northern countries. And also in the south of Europe, we have also countries that face a completely different situation. In Europe, security policy is coined and shaped by authoritarian structures. The police has the power, and they don't want to give that up, even in prevention. In East Europe, for example, there are different structures of powers than in West Europe. So if we want to have more prevention and include the citizens, we will lose some of our powers. The police fears that loss of power. For 15 years, we had this process that the police will give some efforts and measures to the cities, and we don't want like dark sheriffs or security personnel on the street, but if we take that further in prevention, the police will lose some of its power. So we need civilized prevention that we really need. Then I want to say something to the decreasing rate of crimes, and I want to warn you that you don't look behind these figures. We only have a superficial drop in crime rates. The virtual criminality, cyber criminals, and the questions connected of the borders of crimes, looking at cybercriminality, violence, pornography, that all happens on the internet. The mayor may not be interested in that because on the streets it's calm, but violence is prevailing on the internet. And for a politician, this is really hard, and mayors normally tend to be happy if the people are safe at night and can sleep safe and sound. And what I want to say is we have a problem, and sometimes we don't have the right discussions, and policy makers just look at the streets and see it's calm, there's no violence, but there's violence in the heads of our children, there's violence on the internet. And fourth remark, the European elections will show that too liberalized policy will lead to a support of the right wings, and we will see more extremism within the parliament and also in the European institutions. That's what I wanted to say, so we can have a discussion, and that's what you want to say.
This is important, and to have some warnings to be cautious on certain elements. Do we have other comments of what you heard, of what you think is important, what should be asked for? Or do you also all have the impression that we've been here for a very, very long time, we don't see the sunlight, and we have the impression it's late at night, but yeah, great.
Do you think in order to engage in preventive structure, you always need money? In order to do a preventive policy, do you always need money? Because I think that there's something that the administrations can do. They always think they need money. Looking at women who are the victims of domestic violence. We have to find accommodation for them, or refuges. But that calls for money. But I think there are things we can do without money, like educating the citizens before they take decisions respecting security. And you don't need money for that. My question is prevention just a strategy where we need resources? This is a question to Mr. Pinto.
Is there any other question? Because we have started late, we don't have that much time. If there's another question, I would ask the person to speak at now to contribute.
Well, shut up forever.
Exactly, and otherwise you will be married with a forum. No, and otherwise I would like to ask the panelists, starting with Mr. Pinto, to react briefly, and then we go to the conclusion part. Well, you will be late with your second part if you speak now.
Je vais répondre.
Yes, of course. Obviously the answer is no. You don't always need money to engage in good policy, particularly regarding prevention. You're right. However, we know that when we have money, we're able to be more effective. And the problem is that although you might have money for national policy, the European Union thinks that the distribution of the money that it has in its budget, the budget of the European Commission for prevention policies, are in the hands of the government. That is the national government, and it's up to the national authorities to distribute them again. So it's worse than we thought. Why? Because the EU hasn't yet noticed that the cities and regions are entities with their own political will, their own lives and policies. Because the EU says, well, the money is going to your country. It's up to your country to redistribute it. What I say is two things. Elizabeth showed it this morning, that the money that comes for social policy in general to the European Commission is only short-term. And of course, we're going to continue to do prevention and have social policies. But if we want aid, if we have, it would be more interesting if we had some funding for what we want to do, to be honest. I think what you did is very impressive, and I think it's very important what you're planning to do regarding elderly people and security. And if we can work together on that, even without money, it'll be beneficial. But it will be more difficult without money, because everybody's talking about a shortage of funds at the moment. So it will make it hard. We have to have some funding and use it where it's needed. I think it would be important to say that we need to be reminded there is this money at the European Commission level, and remind our national authorities. You're right, money is the nerve of the war. It leads to war as such. The mother of war. Sorry. Well, today, to give citizens or inhabitants a place, especially if they're in difficulty, we would need night mediators. You're talking about nightlife before, and in France we have correspondents of the night. These are people who go through the city during the night. There are 4 of them at the moment in my city. It's all I can afford. But if I got support from the European Union on that, I could have 8 such social workers walking around at night. And of course I need money for that. When I was inspired by the Barcelona program on the question of substitutes for drug addicts, the police were working on repression, but I provided social accompaniment for the drug addict and his or her family by setting up these substitute programs. And I was financed by a European program for the first 3 years, only 3 years. So I can say a bit of money doesn't hurt. Well, with respect to money, but also the idea of he who pays the piper calls the tune, we have prevention policies that are financed by the Belgian Interior Minister or by the region. We negotiate on that, of course. Naturally, the higher authority who we report to then dictates a little bit the lines we have to follow. But it's very acceptable, I think. They're usually quite reasonable. As far as I'm concerned, money is essential for my work. To set up a consultation, for example, I need funding for a professional worker. If communities don't have money, they should just get the stakeholders concerned by an issue around the same table and come up with a plan. But nevertheless, consultation works, as I've said, but somebody has to keep it going. Somebody has to fuel the plans, put them into practice, remind people, keep in contact. You need a minimum of means to have some leadership. And another thing I was saying before, reaching people who are unemployable. Well, there are tools that we're beginning to develop. There are integration companies, as we call them, social companies. generally speaking, these are companies that are not going to be profitable, economically speaking, so they need a certain amount of starting funds, at least, or support, because these are producers of service for the communities. So it's clear they should be given a hand. And the same applies to things for children, programs for women, for example. And people spoke of domestic violence. Well, in the financial crisis we've drawn attention to this. The fact that women who have no job are going to feel obliged to stay with their violent husband. And so the best way of preventing domestic violence is to give the women a job. It's a whole category of the population. And, of course, creating awareness amongst the potential victims and the potential culprits. And naturally, we need money in order to propagate this message in schools as well. So money is essential. And when we talk about a European crime observatory, if we say yes to an observatory for European drug trafficking, and you can't have another one because it's already so expensive to have it for drugs, it's clear it's a magnificent tool. But people say, oh, it'd be too expensive to have another one. But I think we just simply have to find the funds.
Merci bien.
When you say it doesn't, on occasion, it does not need, on occasion there are, well, maybe certain practices that you could implement that do not cost any money, then shouldn't it be about a strategy? I think that the strategy should be, if it doesn't cost any money, then you have to implement it directly. Because, well, then it only improves your practice. And that is something that you do not need to do with EU money. So it's indeed no reason to bother the EU for. But that what you cannot cost without your own budget. But if you see room for improvement that could be achieved with EU money, well, that's something you should lobby for.
Thank you very much. I think we have a broad range of things we wanted for. We have much underlined the role of local authorities that should be taken into account. We have on many occasions asked for the support of the European Union, but I think in many ways we have also voiced types of policies we want. We didn't only say we want money. We said we wanted a focus on prevention that's not been taken, so money spent elsewhere more efficiently. We said we want a more holistic approach. We want to link up things that might not be happening. We might have policies that are more sustainable. So I think also we have expressed ideas of how policies should be made, and I think it is important actually that this type of policies is recognized at the European level. I don't think it's only a question of money, but the way policies are shaped. And I think we have said much of the quality of policies in addition to money here. We will see now if the conclusions that will be done by Dr. Schreier and by Mr. Pinto, will pick this up. I would like to thank all the panelists for the discussion, all the participants for the discussion, and please stay tuned. We will immediately now have the conclusions and have the proposal of a letter. Thank you very much.
Oui, je sais. J'ai vu qu'il est.
Non, mais.
Aber haben wir das Schreiben an der Wand?
Ja, das kommt gleich.
Das wäre super, weil ich habe es jetzt nur auf Deutsch.
Wir können es einfach nochmal auf Englisch für die Hand haben.
Meine Damen und Herren, ich beeile mich und mache es ganz kurz, weil ich bin natürlich in der undankbaren Funktion, der Letzte zu sein. Und wir wollen Ihnen, das haben wir hier Ihnen an die Wand geworfen, ein Schreiben vorschlagen, einen offenen Brief.
Open letter to the representatives of the European institutions, where we've tried to summarize our discussion And I just want to say that apart the first points 1, 2, and 3, that we have a statement, and we have summarized them for the statement of the German Congress on Crime Prevention that will be released, so that in the Karlsruhe Declaration they will be mentioned as well. So that in this Karlsruhe Declaration in Germany and maybe on international level will be shown that we have included these 3 points. I will not read the letter to you. I will just mention a couple of points and explain them. There's an introduction where we see that for 26 years, the towns, cities, and regions, we want to make Europe safer and more just. And this on the basis of our manifesto of Aubervilliers and Saint-Denis, with the title Security, Democracy and Cities. And we demand a balance between repression and prevention, and that we want further development. This letter is written with the goal to demand a new security policy from the European institutions, and especially in the post-Stockholm program. We need a new program. And for this new Stockholm program, we want to make some suggestions that are open to discussion and that should be adopted today. In this paper, we want to highlight the role of communities, cities, and towns, and that this should be an important part also of the European policy. And also when we talk about budget, that financial aid should be given to towns and cities as a partner to implement the European policy, not maybe for social workers, but so that we have means for research, for policy, for strategies and structural measures. And the third point shows that the efforts for safety and security that were found in the Stockholm program, and we need to highlight the preventive approach and put a focus on that, because prevention is more cost-effective and also more sustainable. The other points, and I do not want to mention them in detail, and they explain these 3 points again. It is about European methods that we need, that we have a knowledge basis, a network, and strengthen efficient implementation. And we want to support Europe and not a Europe of different paces. It's also about the support of the networks, that we include the NGOs, EFUS, or other networks, and that they should be also supported more. And point 8 mentions it's not about only internal affairs, but it's also about justice. And this is not mentioned enough. We can't make decisions if we can't be supported by the justice system. And I think the justice also needs to understand prevention. This difference and distance between justice and police is also a problem and something, and an important point that we need to improve. Our colleague has also mentioned this when it is about probation, and has made some remarks. And I think that is really good. And the European Union has to respect the cities, and that the cities are different. I think this is more than important. We should look at all cities that they are the same. There are still differences. Point 11 mentions and highlights that the local authorities are the ones that deal with the problems of migration, and that they need more support in this area as well. It's also about the citizen-centric strategy that we want to develop further. It is about the civil society that has to work together with the police and the local authorities, that this civil society is strengthened. And I think this is a really good paper and a good open letter, and it shows the right direction, and it's Karlsruhe Declaration aims at the same goals, that the local authorities are included, and I'm sure that this is also mentioned in the declaration, and I hope that we will all agree and adopt this paper. I'd like to thank everybody as a representative of the German Forum, for everybody who has put so much effort into this. I want to thank Elizabeth, and for everybody who was here today and that you've stayed such a long time, and I hope you'll get home safe. Thank you.
I suppose this applause is also for the text. So it's only to finalize, because I suppose nobody wants to discuss at this time of the evening the text, although I must ask if anyone has any remarks about it. No. If not, there could be any remark, because sometimes it happens. So, if there is no remarks, I'm very glad we take our statement by unanimously, and want to thank first to the German Forum, to Martin, and to all the Germans that helped this General Assembly to be so successful and so profound, because I suppose we make here 2 days of debate that were very important for our forum. So to you all that received us here in Karlsruhe and organized the things, thank you. Thank you for Elizabeth and our team. I suppose that even each day our team is improving in capacity, in being able to join us together and to make us participate. To you all that resist till the end, and to those that take the plane or the train a little bit earlier, everybody was fantastic. I suppose this was one of the General Assembly where I learned more. And that's fantastic, because I suppose that we are going to our countries and our cities with more rich, because we've learned a bit more of what we need to do. And we are a bit more committed with the works we must done, and committed to the first thing that is our goal, to be together dealing with prevention. So, good trip to everybody, and when you are in your countries and your towns, think of us, think about our network, and if you need to talk, we are all together. Goodbye. Sorry, there is a closing section upstairs, and so I ask those who can attend to the closing session to be there. It will be in, I don't know, suppose half an hour, I suppose, or now or in half an hour. Go and see. Goodbye, good trip to your countries.